Rentability. What does that word even mean? I'm going to tell you what it means, and more importantly, I'm going to tell you why it's absolutely critical to know this word and to understand what it means if you want to be a successful rental property investor. I have seen this word cause a lot of problems for people. And the reason that I even know this word is because I was one of those people. So I'm going to tell you what rentability is. I'm going to tell you why you need to care about rentability, and I mean really care about it. I'm going to tell you what contributes to it and how you can verify it. How you can make sure that the rentability factor of the property that you're thinking about buying as a rental property is there and solid. Okay, let's dive in. What does this weird word mean? Rentability. It's super simple. How rentable is your property? You might think that if you just own a property, people are going to want to rent it. And that's not always the case. And then there's varying degrees. Maybe people want to rent it, but maybe not a ton of people. And the reason why this is critical is if people don't want to rent your property, or there's not really a need for people to rent your property, you're potentially going to be taking on some expenses, such as vacancy. Picture it. If you have one tenant, they leave, you need to find a new tenant. What if it takes you a long time to find a tenant? The whole time you're trying to find a new tenant, you're experiencing a vacancy. You may have a mortgage payment that you have to cover out of pocket during that time. The longer it's vacant, I don't know, it can open up to vandalism. There's a lot of expenses associated with vacancy. Think about it. If no one's in your property paying you rent, there's no income to cover your expenses. It's now on you. So anytime you have a rental property, one of the biggest factors is vacancy, and you want to minimize that as much as possible. In order to minimize that, you need a house that people want to rent. So that way you get a lot of applications. You get people in as fast as possible. Not so fast that you accept just anybody, but people want your property. And the second expense that rentability can cause, or a lack of rentability, is let's say that you're estimating $1,200 a month in rent. It seems like you should be able to get that. Well, if people aren't wanting to move into your property and you're not getting anyone in there, you may have to lower that. Okay, maybe fine, but at some point it's going to start squeezing your cash flow. Is there a possibility you're going to end up negative cash flow? Maybe, it depends on the property, but either way, when you can't get the rents that you have projected that you should be able to get, your numbers are going to change, and that essentially is more money out of your pocket. This is why rentability is so key, because rentability, or the lack of rentability, is a huge cause for expenses, which is not something we as rental property investors want, right? Okay, so what contributes to rentability? What causes different properties to be more rentable and some properties to not be? Number one thing, how many people live in the area? If you buy a property way out in the sticks, in the middle of the boonies, in the most rural area possible, you're only kind of working with so big of a tenant pool. How many people out there want to rent something or need to rent something? Maybe not. Versus if you're in a gigantic city, just from a population standpoint, you're increasing your renter pool. More humans, probably more renters. Now, on the note of location, something else that impacts it is the cost of housing where you are. Think about it. I'm in Los Angeles. I'm in Venice Beach as we speak. Venice Beach and all of Los Angeles, housing prices are astronomical. Most people living in LA, or at least the majority compared to other markets, can't buy a property here. So they have to rent. That automatically increases the renter pool. Now, if you go into like the Midwest or some places in the South, housing is so affordable that why would somebody rent and not just buy a property? If you're talking a good property for $130,000, easy peasy. In LA, you can't even buy a bathroom for $130,000. So how many people are buying in the area in which you're investing versus needing to rent a property? Also about location, demand. How many people want to live where this property is? And do you know one of the biggest factors about demand, aside from desirability, like everyone wants to live in Venice Beach, some people don't understand why, but what about the jobs? People have to live where they can work or access work. These days, more people are working from home. Cool, that opens up maybe some of those more rural areas. But if you go to that rural area, how many people are even living there or moving there? Do they have access to jobs? Assuming people aren't retired, they got to work. So jobs is a big factor for the location. So overall, how many people are renting in the area? How in demand is the area? Because if nobody wants to live in this, whatever city, not helpful. And just generally, how many people are there? But most importantly, how many of them want to rent? So those are some of the factors that can contribute to rentability. And I'll give you a quick little example. I actually bought a property 10 years ago that I thought was going to be my best performing rental property. It was the nicest one I bought. I was like, man, what a steal. And it has been the hardest one to rent because everyone in that area just buys properties. And I was like, seriously? That was too nice of a rental property. Because if somebody desires to live in that property or a property like that, they may be able to afford to just buy it. It was a low cost of living, high-end property. People who want that property can just buy versus some of the smaller, I don't want to say smaller and cheaper properties is the only thing renters want. But in those cases, the people oftentimes can't afford to buy, so they have to rent. See, there's a lot of weird dynamics that can contribute to rentability, and all of these you want to confirm before you buy a rental property. That too nice a rental property that I bought, I ended up having I think it was an 8-month vacancy pretty early on, and I was like, seriously? I was paying that mortgage payment out of pocket for 8 months, and it was because it was too nice of a property, and there was just not a renter pool. I mean, seriously, these are the things you kind of learn as an investor on the job training. Who knew? But because I made that mistake, and I see people make this mistake all the time, I'm doing this video to try and save you from making the same mistake. So, what do you do about it? How does one confirm rentability? Is there a website saying, what is the rentability of my property? No, not exactly. There are a lot of sites where you can get rental reports and you can try and interpret the data to come up with your own, how rentable is it? But let's be honest, data without interpretation and context is fairly worthless. And most of us don't have the interpretation and the context for that area or for the real estate market for that specific property to actually know what the data is telling us. So what do? How do you confirm rentability? Unless you're local to the property, like I'm in Venice Beach, I know that if I buy a rental property here, it's gonna rent because I'm familiar with this area and I know what the demand is. I know what the prices are here. But assuming you're not that familiar, call a third-party property manager. In fact, maybe call 2 or 3 of them. They are the ones who are boots on the ground. They are renting properties out all day long, and they'll be able to tell you down to the street, down to the neighborhood, assuming they're a good property manager, how desirable is this area? Are they seeing the rent? Are they getting the rents that they initially asked for? What are the vacancy times? How fast are they able to rent properties? That's that context and interpretation. They have that. You don't. Statistics don't really help. They are the ones, regardless of what the data says. Again, data, Venice Beach. If you look at the crime stats here, nobody should live here, but it's fine. So let the people with the boots on the ground, with the experience, who are doing this all day, every day, tell you how rentable is this property. And just a heads up, if you call them and say, hey, I would like to check on the rentability of this address, please, they're going to be like, what? It's not a common word, but I don't know another word for it. You just want to say, I want to find out, I'm looking at this possible property. You can always offer to pay them if they, don't just call and waste their time. But just say, I'm looking at this rental property. I'm actually looking for property managers potentially. I just want to kind of feel out, what am I looking at if I go forward with this purchase? However you want to phrase it. But I am telling you, from 10 to 11 years of me owning rental properties and the same 10 to 11 years of helping people buy rental properties, I can tell you rentability is huge and it's not being talked about. And people don't use that word. It's not in their vocabulary, and it needs to be. Because if the rentability is there, your profits will be there, because something can always work itself out. Maybe there's a loss of profit or whatever, but as long as people want to rent your property, you're in good shape. It's literally going to be the difference whether your investment makes it or not. If nobody wants to rent your property, you might be in bad shape. So, if this was helpful and you like this new word in your vocabulary, hit the like button. Like the word, like the video, help a sister out. And make sure that you're subscribed to my site as well, because every week I put a new video out, and what I want to do is pull out more of these underlying factors that could impact your investing that maybe people aren't talking about. If I can help save you from a mistake with your rental property, a mistake that I made, that's what I want to do. So make sure you're subscribed so I can help you and you see the videos that I put out to help set you up for the best rental property experience possible. On that note, I will see you on the next video.